this story is not all that uncommon to us. A spouse is under some sort of financial strain. They want out of their marriage. They want to be with somebody else. The expense of a divorce, the stigma of a divorce doesn't make sense to them. So what do? They decide to kill. A Colorado dentist is found guilty for poisoning his wife to death over a 10-day period. Plus, 2 Washington parents are found not guilty of attempting to murder their own daughter in what investigators described as an honor killing. And a legal win for a former IRS agent accused of killing his wife and the man he set up to take the fall. All this and more this week on Courtroom Confidential. A couple of big verdicts on cases that we have been following closely this week. We are recording this episode on Friday, August 1st, 2025, and this is your Courtroom Confidential weekly roundup. Let's jump in. Colorado dentist James Craig has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for murdering his wife in a methodical plot to poison her. Craig was convicted Wednesday of first-degree murder for poisoning his wife, Angela Craig. A jury also found him guilty of 5 additional charges: 2 counts of solicitation to commit tampering with evidence, 2 counts of solicitation to commit perjury, and 1 count of solicitation to commit first-degree murder. During closing arguments Tuesday, prosecutor Michael Morrow told the jury that Craig had been unfaithful throughout most of his 23-year marriage and ultimately chose murder as his way out. In the end, Morrow said, James Craig spent 10 days killing Angela Craig. Angela Craig was innocent, he said. James Craig is guilty. Craig's defense countered that Angela died by suicide. Attorney Lisa Fine Moses told the jury that her client's constant cheating was a motive for Angela to take her own life. 20-some years of him cheating on Angela Craig. He broke her, Moses said. He broke her heart, her soul. Angela died in March of 2023 after being hospitalized 3 times in just over a week. Prosecutors argued that Craig murdered Angela while juggling financial problems and an affair with a Texas orthodontist. Her cause of death was acute poisoning by cyanide and tetrahydrozoline, a chemical found in over-the-counter eye drops. Once he was arrested, prosecutors say Craig then tried to pay an inmate $20,000 to kill the lead detective on the case, and also offered another $20,000 to find people who would falsely testify that Angela was suicidal. Right after the verdict was read, the court moved straight into sentencing. Angela's family members gave powerful statements remembering her life and confronting Craig. Angela's older sister, Catherine Prey, delivered a searing statement during sentencing describing Craig as a snake in the grass who betrayed the very family he had vowed to join and protect. We were fooled. We were unable to help her. We were unable to save her. We were unable to rescue her from the person who was supposed to honor her, protect her, she said. To save himself, he and his lawyers attacked her. Her mental health, her faith, her loyalty, even accusing her of taking her own life. Shameful. One of Craig's 6 children described setting a nightly 10 p.m. alarm labeled Mom as a personal ritual to remember, miss, and mourn her. Another of the couple's daughters spoke directly about the pain of losing her mother at the hands of her father. My dad was supposed to be my hero, but he'll forever be the villain in my story, and that hurts so bad. James Craig declined to speak during his sentencing. What's happening here? Well, it is a sad state of affairs that this story is not all that uncommon to us. A spouse is under some sort of financial strain. They want out of their marriage. They want to be with somebody else. The expense of a divorce, the stigma of a divorce doesn't make sense to them. So what do? They decide to kill. But rarely do we see a case that is this calculated and cold-hearted. 10 days of torture. And that's what I'm going to call it. Torture. That's what it was. 10 days of agony for this woman, wondering what was wrong with her. Why was her body failing her? Doctors unable to explain to her why it was that she was dying over this 10-day period while she desperately clung to life. But it all wasn't happening quick enough for James Craig. He had his lover coming. He had his new life that he wanted to start. And one of the most cold-hearted actions I've ever heard of, sneaks into her room with a syringe of poison to give her the final dose to take her life. But what really then distinguishes this case from other cases that we have seen similar to this is what he does after that, what he does after his arrest, the planting of evidence, the fabricating of witnesses, plotting to kill the lead detective in the case, even getting his own daughter to somehow take part in this fabrication because he was so desperate to evade capture. Jurors, I think, can wrap their heads around the idea that an innocent person might be arrested for a crime. They've seen it before. They've seen where people who are not guilty get arrested, be accused of something, and are able to prove their own innocence. They can wrap their head around that. But they ask themselves this question: what would I do if I were that innocent person accused of a crime? How would I behave after being arrested for something horrific that I did not do? And when they see someone plot to plant evidence, plot to bribe witnesses, try to get their own child to fabricate evidence, attempt to kill the lead detective, that's what jurors look at and say, that is the actions of a guilty person. It was his own desperate, narcissistic, selfish desire to have this fantasy life that he had imagined at all costs is what finally did him in. But what do you guys think? To you, what was the most convincing piece of evidence in this case? Please let us know in the comments. After 3 days of deliberations, a Washington jury found parents Ihsan and Zahraa Ali not guilty of attempting to kill their teenage daughter outside Timberland High School last fall. The girl's father, Ihsan, was, however, found guilty of assault and unlawful imprisonment. The mother, Zahraa, was only found guilty of violating a court order, but was determined to be not guilty of attempted murder or assault. During closing arguments earlier this week, prosecutors said the evidence was clear about what happened on October 18th, 2024. The testimony by everyone is that her eyes have rolled into the back of her head. Her face is pale, her lips are blue. Heather Stone, the lead prosecutor on the case, said during her closing arguments on Monday. Multiple witnesses told the jury they saw Ihsan Ali strangling the 17-year-old girl known publicly as Fatima and continuing for 15 to 18 seconds after she lost consciousness until adult bystanders intervened. Authorities said Ihsan may have threatened an honor killing over his daughter's refusal to enter an arranged marriage to an older man in Iraq. But prosecutors later wrote in court documents that there is no express evidence that such was the motivation of either defendant in this case. Zahraa Ali was accused of helping her husband carry out the attack. Prosecutors argued that video footage shows her offering no assistance to her daughter. And when you look at that video, you see she does not provide any aid at any time to her child. Zero aid, Stone said. That is not an effort to comfort her child. Again, that is not where her loyalty lies in this situation, and she demonstrates that over and over again. Defense attorneys rejected the idea that either parent intended to kill their daughter. There was no nefarious intent, Eric Keating, who represented Ihsan Ali, said. There was no intent to hurt anybody badly. There was no intent to kill anybody. There's an intent to take your daughter home. My client is not guilty, Timothy Leary, who represents Zahraa Ali, said. I think we can all agree this is a tragedy. They certainly could have done things differently, but that does not make this a crime. Sentencing for both parents is set for mid-August. Mrs. Ali will be released from custody Thursday on her own personal recognizance, but is ordered not to leave Thurston County and follow no contact orders that are in effect. What's happening here? This case is really horrific. Our gut reaction may be to think this is an open and shut case for guilt. And I get it. I understand that. But as always, the devil is in the details. This case boils down to one concept, and that is of intent. Intent proven not through words, but through actions, which may have made the difference in this case. Neither defendant yells out the words, "I'm going to kill you." No evidence was presented that the parents laid out a plan to kill their child. Instead, jurors were tasked with drawing conclusions from circumstantial evidence from the parents' actions. Now, think about this. Had the father brought a gun and fired off shots, there is no doubt that those actions speak to someone who is showing an intent to kill. but it becomes less clear-cut when it is hands around someone's throat. Now, before you react and say, well, of course that is intent to kill, think about what the jurors had to decide in this case. What does it mean to wrap your hands around someone's throat until they lose consciousness and bystanders have to intervene? You could say, well, absolutely, that shows intent to kill. And maybe to you, the answer is clear, but is it beyond a reasonable doubt to jurors that this was not parents going too far in some sort of wildly misguided discipline? It could be that that is what the jurors were struggling with in this case. Remember, attempted murder is what we call a specific intent crime. The prosecution had to show that they specifically intended to kill their daughter, not harm her, not scare her, not control her, but kill her. Could the jury have struggled with this under these circumstances? No weapon being used, no words of intent. The parents are dealing with their own child in broad daylight in front of many witnesses. That becomes a much more difficult question. But what do you guys think? Do you think the parents intended to kill their daughter in this case, or do you think the jury got it right? Please let us know in the comments. A Virginia judge has ruled that prosecutors cannot use a recorded interview with Brendan Banfield's young daughter in his upcoming murder trial. Banfield, an IRS agent, is accused of killing his wife, Christine Banfield, and another man, Joseph Ryan, in February of 2023. Banfield's daughter was home during the attack, but this week, Judge Penny Azkarate said the girl's forensic interview does not meet the legal standard to be used at trial, despite later child abuse charges being filed. Prosecutors argued the child's interview should be admissible because she is a victim of her father's alleged killing. It's an act of abuse against her by virtue of what her father did that morning, Deputy Commonwealth's attorney Eric Klingon said during Friday's hearing. But Banfield's attorney, John F. Carroll, argued Banfield never gave permission for police to question his daughter at headquarters. Judge Azkarate ultimately agreed with the defense, saying the interview would only be admissible if the girl were directly victimized. And while child abuse charges were filed later, they were not the reason police interviewed her that day. Banfield's co-defendant, Juliana Perez Magalhaes, was Banfield's live-in au pair at the time. Magalhaes originally told police that she and Banfield walked in on Joseph Ryan attacking Christine and both opened fire with different weapons. But last year, Magalhaes pled guilty to manslaughter. Ahead of her plea, Magalhaes provided a proffer to officials. That interview corroborated the theory that Banfield lured Ryan to the house through a fetish website and that Magalhaes and Banfield had been in a romantic relationship before the murders. Magalhaes also admitted she helped Banfield carry out the plot to kill his wife and frame Ryan. Banfield faces a life sentence if convicted at trial set for October 20th. Perez Magalhaes faces up to 10 years on the manslaughter charge and is set to be sentenced in December. What's happening here? While I understand the law and believe the judge correctly applied the law in this case, I'm not sure I entirely agree with the outcome. The prosecution was trying to be very clever here. It's true. Banfield's daughter was not being directly victimized by her father at the time of the interview, and therefore her interview would not be admissible pursuant to a law in Virginia that allows for the admissibility of these types of interviews where a child is a victim. But the prosecution makes a very good point. The child has been victimized by her father by this murder. You murdered this child's mother. You did that while the child was there. To me, that is clearly an argument towards victimization of that child. But the judge says that that was not the reason for the interview. Here's the problem, though. The case was still developing and under investigation at that time. Investigators were not even entirely clear who was responsible for the murder at that time. So police didn't know that she was a victim at that time. Had they known, they may have treated that interview differently, and they may have categorized her differently. Seems to me the purpose of the law is to allow for children's statements where they are victims. Well, she clearly was a victim here, even though investigators did not realize it at the time. Her status as a victim didn't change just because investigators realized it. She always was a victim. So just because they charged her as a victim later on, to me, does not mean that they should not have the opportunity to use that interview. But what do you guys think? Do you think the judge got it right? Please let us know in the comments. Before we dive into the other cases making headlines this week, I'm going to ask one very small favor from you, and that is, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel right now. We want to continue to provide you with the highest quality content that we possibly can, and the best way we can do that is through your support. Also making headlines, a judge has ruled that prosecutors can use certain digital evidence in the upcoming murder trial of a Massachusetts man accused of killing his wife, including searches made on his son's iPad for how long DNA lasts and the best ways to get rid of a body. Brian Walshe is charged with killing and dismembering his wife, Anna Walshe, in January of 2023. The couple's 3 young boys were reportedly home at the time. The judge found that investigators stayed within the scope of Walsh's consent when searching his devices. However, some evidence tied to search warrants, specifically data from his mother's car's GPS and specific days of his cell phone records, will be suppressed. Prosecutors also revealed in court filings this week that they've asked 5 out-of-state witnesses to testify at trial. That includes a private investigator hired by Walsh's mother to look into Anna's alleged infidelity and some of Anna's former co-workers. Anna Walshe, a D.C.-based real estate professional and mother of 3, was last seen on New Year's Day of 2023. Her body has never been recovered. Days after Anna's disappearance, investigators found a hacksaw, a blood-soaked rug, and a broken knife with blood on it in the couple's Cohasset home. Police also searched trash facilities across areas where Walshe had traveled in the days following her disappearance. In March of 2023, a Norfolk County grand jury indicted Walshe on a charge of murder, misleading a police investigation, obstruction of justice, and improper conveyance of a human body in connection with his wife's death. Walshe has been held without bail since his arrest. He's also serving a 3-year prison sentence for selling fake Andy Warhol artwork. His murder trial is scheduled to begin on Monday, October 20th. The deadline for pretrial motions in the case against a former Ohio divorce attorney charged with murdering his client in 2013 has been extended after his attorney said they haven't received the full scope of discovery materials. Gregory Moore is charged with aggravated murder, conspiracy, kidnapping, and multiple counts of murder in the stabbing of Eliza Sherman, a fertility nurse and mother of 4. She was killed outside the Cleveland law office where Moore worked and had been representing her in her divorce. During Wednesday's pretrial hearing, defense attorney John Paul Ryan said they've received over 60,000 pages and over several terabytes of data, with more still expected. Without the complete discovery, Ryan said the defense cannot file all necessary motions. The state is still being provided with additional information from law enforcement and did not object to the extension. Judge Kira Krivosh granted the request and said the defense may file motions as needed moving forward, with the state given time to respond. Moore is currently out on a $2 million surety bond with GPS monitoring. He's barred from contacting Sherman's family, carrying weapons, or obtaining a passport. His next pretrial hearing is scheduled for August 14th. Trial is set to begin March 30th. The trial of a Florida woman and her estranged husband accused of plotting to kill her ex-husband in 2022 has been pushed back nearly a full year. Shanna Gardner and Mario Fernandez are charged with first-degree murder in what prosecutors allege was a coordinated plan to kill Jared Bridegan, who was ambushed and shot after stopping to remove a tire from the road on February 16, 2022. His then 2-year-old daughter was in the car at the time. The alleged gunman, Henry Tenon, once a tenant of Fernandez, had pled guilty and agreed to testify against the estranged couple. But in a major development earlier this year, Tenon recanted that testimony and requested a new attorney. His plea deal is now in question, raising uncertainty of how central his role will be at trial. Previously set to begin in October of this year, the trial was delayed as attorneys continued to prepare for the death penalty case. At a pretrial hearing on Thursday, Judge London Kite agreed to set jury selection for August 3rd of 2026. The trial is expected to last through mid-September and could include a penalty phase. The court is preparing for the complex nature of the proceedings, with separate juries for each defendant and as many as 500 potential jurors summoned due to the case's high-profile nature. Prosecutors say they've turned over their full discovery, including recovered data from damaged hardware seized during the investigation. They did not elaborate on what that data included. The next pretrial hearing is set for September 19th. Attorneys for the hip-hop mogul recently convicted on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution are asking a federal judge to throw out his conviction or grant him a new trial, arguing there wasn't enough evidence to support the charges that his conduct was not criminal. In a 62-page motion filed Wednesday in federal court, Sean Diddy Combs' legal team argues in part that the Mann Act, the law under which Combs was convicted, was too broadly interpreted to apply to Combs because, quote, there was insufficient evidence that Mr. Combs transported anyone with the intent to engage in prostitution, even if it includes any sex for money. They say Combs didn't have a commercial motive, didn't intend for the escorts to sleep with him, and that paying to film sexual activity is protected by the First Amendment. They also argued that the jury was unfairly influenced by inflammatory evidence tied to the more serious charges Combs was acquitted of, including racketeering and sex trafficking, and that this spillover prejudice justifies a new trial. Combs was acquitted on the more serious charges after a 6-week trial during which witnesses testified about so-called freak-offs, drug-fueled group sex sessions arranged by Combs and allegedly filmed by him. Wednesday evening's filing comes one day after Combs' attorneys also asked the court to reconsider bail, proposing that he post a $50 million bond and reside in his home in Miami while awaiting sentencing. There has literally never been a case like this one, where a person and his girlfriend arrange for adult men to have consensual sexual relations with the adult, long-term girlfriend as part of a demonstrated swingers lifestyle, and has been prosecuted and incarcerated under the Mann Act, the defense letter asking for bail said. Sean Combs should not be in jail for this conduct. Sentencing is set for October 3rd. A New Mexico judge has dismissed the civil lawsuit filed by an actor and producer of the Western movie Rust, which accused prosecutors and law enforcement of misconduct in connection with the fatal 2021 on-set shooting that left one dead and another wounded. Judge Casey Fitch tossed Alec Baldwin's case on Tuesday due to a lack of significant action over the past 6 months. The order gives either side 30 days to ask for it to be reinstated. Baldwin's legal team says settlement talks are underway and that the lawsuit could be refiled if those talks fall through. Baldwin filed the suit in January, accusing Special Prosecutor Carrie Morrissey, District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwies, Santa Fe County law enforcement investigators, and other public officials of abusing the legal process, defaming him, and mishandling evidence as they pursued a manslaughter charge in the 2021 shooting that killed cinematographer Halyna Hutchins and wounded director Joel Souza. He alleged the prosecutors and the sheriff's office deliberately withheld evidence and targeted him for political reasons. The criminal case was dropped during trial in 2024 after a judge found that Baldwin was not given key evidence about the source of the live round that killed Hutchins. Hutchins's death, Hollywood's first on-set fatal shooting in nearly 30 years, shocked the movie industry and sparked calls for an overhaul of firearms safety on film productions. The gun, a reproduction 1873 single-action Army revolver, fired a live round inadvertently loaded by Hannah Gutierrez, the production's weapons handler. Gutierrez was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in March and sentenced to 18 months in jail. Baldwin has always said live rounds should not have been allowed on set, and he was not responsible for weapons safety. A Florida woman serving life in prison for the murder of her boyfriend who died after being zipped into a suitcase and beaten during a game of hide and seek may soon be without legal representation once again, as her appellate attorney has asked to withdraw from her case. Boone, who was convicted last year for the 2020 death of Jorge Torres Jr., has expressed her intent to appeal, but says she's been unable to do so because her attorney has stopped communicating with her. Now that attorney, Joshua Adams, has filed a motion to formally withdraw. Adams was appointed to Boone's case in December of 2024, becoming the second appellate attorney to represent her. In his withdrawal request, Adams cited a career change, writing that he is no longer handling appellate work or taking on court-appointed cases. Boone, in a 5-page filing of her own, told the court that she's made multiple attempts to reach Adams by phone, letters, and emails from third-party representatives since his initial message to her in February, but has not heard back. This marks yet another legal shakeup for Boone. She cycled through 8 attorneys before her trial and at one point was ordered to represent herself. Her trial attorney, James Owens, ultimately stepped in voluntarily. Boone has until September 1st to file her appeal. I wanted to tell you something that I came across while working my day job. I was checking my emails for criminal defense inquiries, and I had to wade through what felt like hundreds of spam emails just to find a few legitimate ones. It was frustrating, but more than that, it was a wake-up call. That kind of junk doesn't just show up by itself. So I Googled myself just to see what was out there, and it was disturbing. There were sites that listed my telephone number, my email address, even the names and addresses of my friends. It made me feel very exposed, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. That is why we are very excited to announce our first ever sponsor, Aura. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number and why you have an inbox full of junk, this is why. Brokers collect and sell your information without your permission and make billions doing it. Even though they are legally required to move it if you request them to do so, sometimes getting that done is almost impossible. Aura does the hard part for you, automatically requesting removal from those shady websites and keeping that info off from them. We talk about security and crime all of the time on this channel, and I wasn't protecting myself. I was like the plumber whose own pipes leak at home. It's an all-in-one digital security platform. You get alerts if your information is found on the dark web, fraud alerts from your bank, a VPN, an antivirus, a password manager, and even $5 million in identity theft insurance. It's all in one app with US-based support 24/7. That's why I chose Aura and why we are recommending it to all of you. You can try it free for 14 days if you just go to aura.com/courtroomconfidential. In those 2 weeks, you'll see exactly where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and neither should you. It's a great product, and it's a great way to support the channel. Please check it out. Before we get to what's coming up next week, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of this growing community, and to give a special shout out to Christy G05 for their comment on Spotify, and to our CC crew members, Miss Dina and Sophia MX9SH, for your support over on YouTube. We can't thank you enough for your continued support. Please keep those reviews coming. We appreciate your help in spreading the word about Courtroom Confidential. On the docket for next week, Christina Formella, a former Illinois high school special education teacher who is accused of sexually assaulting a teenage student multiple times, is set to return to court on Monday, August 4th. Stephen Lawson, the Kentucky man who was convicted in May of conspiracy to murder and tampering with physical evidence in the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, will be sentenced on Wednesday, August 6th. Jasveen Singha, an alleged drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, who is accused of supplying late actor Matthew Perry with a lethal dose of ketamine, will be in court Wednesday, August 6th for a pretrial conference. Larry Millette, the California man accused of killing his wife, who remains missing more than 4 years after vanishing from her home, will be in court Thursday, August 7th for a motions hearing. Donna Adelson, accused of masterminding the 2014 murder for hire of her former son-in-law, Dan Markell, will return to court on Friday, August 8th for a final pretrial conference. Aaron Spencer, an Arkansas man charged with second-degree murder, will be back in court on Friday, August 8th for a pretrial conference. Spencer is charged in the 2024 death of Michael Fossler, who he shot after finding him inside a truck with his missing 14-year-old daughter late at night. And finally, please join us this Sunday for our special question and answer series, Sunday Fun Day. All are invited to leave us a voice message at thecourtroomconfidential.com, which I will answer live during tomorrow's show at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. You can find the live stream on YouTube, X, and Facebook. And that is it for us this week, folks. I am your host, Josh Ritter. You can find us on social media at CR Confidential on X, at The Courtroom Confidential on Instagram, or at thecourtroomconfidential.com. Thank you again for joining me. Have a great weekend, and I will see you again next week for another episode of Courtroom Confidential.